What's up, world? This is Maxwell 3000 Productions. I am Maxwell 3000 here again with my pops for a family talk, family conversation. Uh, I appreciate you being here with me, pops. It feels like it's been a long time since we've been together. I guess it really has been a long time since I've seen you. So I really appreciate us getting to do this. And then when we haven't been able to do it, it's kind of messed up my schedule. So I appreciate you jumping back on here with me.
Yeah, I've missed it.
Yeah. So just kind of recapping where we're at and kind of your life story. You have gone from uh, freshman year at MTSU to getting married, joining the Air Force, getting married, receiving your vocational training, and kind of settling in to your post, your station, and that was in Fayetteville, North Carolina, at Pope Air Force Base, which is now a conglomerate part of the just an armed forces base. Is that correct?
Part of Fort Bragg.
Fort Bragg, and something about Fort Liberty. Is that what they changed it to, and then they changed it back, or something like that?
That's possible. I remember that happening, but I don't. Yeah, that's
The fort,
possible.
because Bragg was a Confederate general. Is that correct?
That is accurate. Yeah.
And I think it was changed to Fort Liberty instead of Fort Bragg, and then maybe in this current administration maybe changed back.
That's probably right.
Okay. Pope Air Force Base is where you were stationed at as air traffic controller. Um, and you were telling me about your job and telling me about really how your academic career got restarted in that. But I really wanted to back up a little bit because before we got into that, you talked about this kind of a duplex or townhome type living situation and how you really had some good neighbors, and there was some community businesses, the service station that you were, kind of looked out for you, and even the Bonnie Doon Baptist Church. And I want to know more about Fayetteville, I guess. And Bonnie Doon, I was looking at, that's actually a Scottish term for a nice hill or a pleasant hill or something like that. And that was interesting, being that location in North Carolina, and kind of the Scottish Irish settlements, and kind of thinking about all of that. But tell me, what was Fayetteville, North Carolina, and that community that y'all lived in? What do you remember about that?
Fayetteville was a pretty good sized city. I'd say it probably equated to Murfreesboro, size wise. And where we were living in Bonnie Doon was it's sort of between Fayetteville and Fort Bragg. It was before you would get to Fort Bragg. I could be at my work in 10 or 15 minutes real easy. And also at in that general location, the address Methodist College, now Methodist University, is in Fayetteville. So that was all real close. And I could be at college in 5 or 10 minutes from where we lived. And so it was just a an ideal place to be as far as living arrangement. We lived in a duplex. I forget the lady's name that lived beside us. She was a civil servant at Fort Bragg. Really nice lady. Uh, and I'd say, we were in our 20s. This lady was probably in her 40s. She's a bit older, but it's really nice. Um, Probably 2 blocks away would have been and I forget the name or the number of the road, but it was the kind of the main road that went into Fort Bragg, 4-lane road. That's where the gas station was. A fellow by the name of McLeod, Mr. McLeod, was all I knew that owned it and run it. Just really a super nice guy, and if I need a little credit, he'd take care of me. It's just it was a good experience, and Bonnie Doon Baptist Church would have been on, like you're going in toward Fort Bragg.
Yeah, and so what I was reading about it, that Bonnie Doon community, which it sounds like y'all were living in, it was very much kind of in between the downtown Fayetteville and there's the university down there and Fort Bragg, and kind of a really a mixed demographic community. It's the research that I've had. Is that kind of what you remember?
Yeah, and I didn't think about it at the time, but you're exactly right. That's a very good description.
And even some of a historic area getting closer to downtown Fayetteville. Even is what I read a little bit.
Yeah, and
Um,
at the time, Fayetteville was kind of a rough place to be. It was right Vietnam was closing down, and so a lot of the 82nd Airborne troops were, they're kind of some of the roughest or toughest guys in the military. You got the Green Berets there. Uh, all those guys were there. Well, downtown Fayetteville uh, was as they actually call it Vietnam. It was a rough. Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't hardly go downtown at the time.
yes, and so what I'm taking from that, are you a lot of returning servicemen, kind of with what's going on, nowhere to be. I
Well,
don't
they're
want to
still in
feel
service. They're
still
still
in
in.
service, but
Yeah,
just kind of hanging around the city where they're stationed at. Is that what's
yeah,
going on?
yeah. And off duty times. I mean, it was the. I mean, I was back over there, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago just to visit, and it's really nice downtown now. It's cleaned up, very good city. But at the time, you're talking about fundamentally just strip joints and beer joints and shootings and cuttings and like Lower Broad used to be in Nashville back in the day.
Yeah, I was about to say we may have seen that same type of gentrification here
Yeah.
in Nashville. That's interesting. How did you perceive that at the time? Did you see a big issue there? And if you did you have any understanding of the causal relationships of that? What was your kind of perspective on that at the time?
Well, at the time I was so busy, going to college full time and working full time, and then doing the stuff at church. I might not have a whole lot of time to do anything else. I mean,
Yeah,
I studied a lot.
yeah, yeah. How important was it for you to have those community structures? Because I think about what we talked about your upbringing and your childhood and how fundamental the church was in providing community, and even an outlet for your personal expression and your individual expression. And then you also talked about your time in Mississippi, that even during that short time, there was a church community that y'all were involved in. How important was that for you to kind of have that, to maybe feel like you had a piece of home?
Yeah, and I don't think at the time I thought in that way, but yes, absolutely. And it was, going to find a church was just a normal thing to do for. I mean, just always was in church, was going to go to church. Never really anticipated being involved in as far as teaching or leadership or anything like that, but ended up working with the youth while I was there. Uh, Wednesday night programs, and had a they had a I guess it was I don't know, it was a church league. I think it was a church basketball league that I got a bunch of the young people together, and we did pretty good. I had a couple really good athletes that were there, and we did all right. They did all right. And it was just fun hanging out with them, and being
Yeah.
I guess and again, not really thinking about it. I guess kind of a positive role model.
Yeah. Well, it's just interesting to me because I've been to Fayetteville, North Carolina, and I've been to Biloxi, Mississippi, and obviously I've grown up in Tennessee. And even you could either go from Nashville to Memphis to Knoxville to Chattanooga, and there's a little bit different culture in every one of those areas. And so I just wondered, I guess, if those traditions kind of provided some security in your life in a new
Probably.
place.
Yeah. I remember just thinking about it. One of the young men who's was a really good athlete. I think he was, he was in high school. His dad was a sergeant major in 82nd Airborne, and I'll be honest with you, I was intimidated by him, you know, but it just but they were members of the church and pretty active, but just knowing the lifestyle and the missions of the 82nd Airborne and what I was doing, uh, I had no doubt he could kick my butt, you know. But never, and that never came up. But in my mind, I want this guy on my side, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And just briefly, we talked about some of those differences in different communities. Did you notice any bit of that from your travels, just from around Middle Tennessee to Biloxi, and then over to Fayetteville? Did you have any perspective on that, or can you give me commentary on maybe some cultural differences just in those areas?
The cultural difference to me was the military community versus the civilian community. As far as the church in Laverne, Tennessee, Biloxi, Mississippi, or Fayetteville, North Carolina, not really. I didn't. Uh,
So that really that provided you some consistency, then, kind of like
yeah,
we said before.
yeah, yeah,
So, yeah, and it wasn't. And what's very interesting, and I see this even looking back on my life, as far as you and I would travel in places, and anywhere that I've lived, like I've always just felt like the church being that constant, very not going to really talk about it, but like you and I in Boston, right, and just kind of walking in the Presbyterian Church somewhere we didn't really have no business being, but to us, from our perspective, it was just another kind of constant. And I hear that in other people's lives. There's always a bit of a conversation around our church as far as the music and traditional music versus contemporary music. And I hear people say, those traditions, not just the music, but the traditional service,
yeah.
gives them comfort because of that consistency. And I just that's kind of interesting to me in people's lives. Um, Tell me more about the youth group and y'all being involved in that. Was that something that you did, or was that something that you and my mother kind of did together? What was going on there?
There we it was we don't both did it. Uh, I I was probably a little more active just because I had the background in basketball and was able to do those kind of things, and your mother would work a normal day shift, whatever her way, but daytime hours. Whereas in my job, I was working swing shifts, so I worked a couple of days. I'd work days, a couple of times I'd work swing, sometimes I'd work mids, and so on some of those off hours, particularly in the summertime, I get the youth together and call them up and say, hey, meet me at the tennis court, and I'd get together and just play tennis and have a devotion, or just so I was a little more flexible as far as my time was concerned. But if we had to do something at church, uh, like a get-togethers, and so your mother was involved in that. So both really.
That's interesting. And I look at kind of what it's really a lifestyle of what you're talking about as far as being involved in the church and kind of being involved in athletics or organized sports and these programs that you're kind of talking about. I mean, these are things that you did all through my childhood, and then later on, you and I kind of have done together. And I remember not really thinking about those things as an active ministry or an outreach or a service. It was just kind of really part of our lifestyle. But thinking back, so for me, it's not a strange thing to be involved in those things. But what kind of caused you? What gave you that motivation, or did you have some mentor that said, "Hey, this is an avenue to relate to people, that I can use this as a format of programming to be a ministry, to be a positive impact in the church and the community"?
Yeah, and I'll say I don't think I thought about it at the time, but the pastor of the church uh, approached me about or us about doing those things, working with the youth, and so I mean it was to me it was kind of an easy thing, and I was going to play basketball anyway, you know. I was going to be on the tennis court anyway, and so we was going to do hiking anyway. So to get those young people involved and, uh, and to incorporate some Christian values in it was pretty simple.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I see that too. And I know there's a lot of people, particularly like educators and people that are trained in that field, that you know um, find it easy to develop some programming on the spot. But then there's a lot of folks that just are kind of lost in doing that, and I don't think that I have any kind of innate talent necessarily, right? But I look at the training that I had through the experiences with you doing those things, where it's just like if there's a situation that, oh, we need some programming, well, we can figure something, we can get something going pretty
Right.
easy. Well, do we have some sort of ball? Whether it be a volleyball or a basketball or whatever, then we can do something. And if not, we can play tag, right? There's something that
Right.
we can do to engage in that way. And I don't know. I think maybe that I took that for granted growing up, and I see a really big value in that now. So I appreciate that, and that's why it's kind of interesting to me of how that really developed. Because I mean, I understand the leaders at the church, maybe giving you some curriculum for a devotional, but like, you know, I don't know. It's something that comes natural to me, but it seems like something that tends to be difficult, maybe in some respects. So
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that until you were just saying it. But later on when I went into the army, one of the big things that we that the army pushed and was a good thing was to have what they call pocket lesson plans. If there's some dead time, you need to be able to use that time to train regardless. And we did that a lot in the army. I never thought about that until you just said that. That's kind of what we did with the church.
yeah, and I think that's a conversation that we're going to get into when we get to that period of your life. But it's interesting to me that you've not even had that type of training yet,
Right,
and
right.
you're kind of doing those same
Yeah.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I said I hadn't connected that dot until just then.
right, right. Well, that's good stuff. Now I want to kind of transition into more of your academic life and that advisor that you had. But I want to be careful to kind of give that its own time and enough space for us to dive into. So let's kind of leave today's conversation there in kind of thinking in nostalgia on the Bonnie Doon community there in
Yeah.
Fayetteville and how much we appreciate them and them having that, and the church being that consistent force in your life.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right, Pops. Well, I really appreciate you spending the time with me. This is Maxwell 3000 Productions. I am Maxwell 3000. Peace and love.